The studio lights were bright. The audience was warm. The cameras were rolling. It was supposed to be a routine morning, a legendary actor, a famous talk show, and a simple conversation about a new film, nothing more. But within minutes, less than half an hour, that ordinary morning would become one of the most talked about moments in the history of daytime television. Not because of what was planned, but because of what no one saw coming. This is the story of the day Samuel L. Jackson walked onto the View set and walked off having delivered a masterclass that millions of people would never forget. Imagine the View studio on a typical weekday morning, the kind of set you've seen 1,000 times. Bright primary colors, perfectly arranged mugs of coffee that nobody actually drinks, a live audience buzzing with anticipation, armed with a quiet thrill that comes from being present at something, even if they don't yet know what that something will be. The hosts are settled in. The atmosphere is light, almost celebratory. Because when a guest of Samuel L. Jackson's caliber walks through those doors, even the most seasoned television professionals feel the electricity. Jackson himself is every inch the professional. Over 150 films, 3 decades of work, a reputation forged not just in the fires of Hollywood, but in the discipline and commitment of a man who takes his craft seriously. He is dressed sharp. He carries himself with the relaxed confidence of someone who has done 1,000 of these interviews and will do 1,000 more. He settles into the guest chair. He smiles at the audience. He is, by every measure, exactly where he is supposed to be, a man doing his job. For a while, everything is exactly as it should be. The interview opens like most do, pleasantries, laughter. Jackson answers questions about his career, his latest project, his experiences in an industry he has helped define. He is generous with his answers, funny, insightful, the kind of guest every talk show hopes to land. The audience leans in, charmed. The other hosts are engaged, delighted even. You can feel the ease in the room, that rare golden quality of a conversation that's going exactly the way it should. And then Joy Behar decides to interject. It starts innocuously enough, a comment disguises a question, the kind of observation that, on its surface, sounds almost casual. You know, Samuel, she begins, with that trademark smirk, the one her fans recognize as the prelude to something sharp. I've always wondered something about actors like you. Jackson raises an eyebrow. Just slightly, a flicker of something crossing his expression. Not alarm, not yet, but a quiet, instinctive awareness. A veteran sensing a shift in the wind. What's that, Joy? What followed was not a question. Not really. Well, Behar continued, her voice carrying the weight of someone who believes they are about to say something important. You've made a career out of playing these tough guy roles, these angry characters. Do you ever worry that you're just reinforcing negative stereotypes? The studio went quiet. Not the performative quiet of a dramatic pause, the real kind, the kind that settles over a room when everyone in it simultaneously, instinctively, realizes that something has just gone wrong. The other hosts shifted in their seats, an almost imperceptible stiffening, the collective body language of people who know exactly where this road leads and want desperately to get off it. Jackson's expression remained calm, but something had changed behind his eyes. A door, quietly closing. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady, measured. The way a man's voice gets when he is choosing, very carefully, how to respond. But Behar pressed on, seemingly unaware or unbothered by the tension she was actively creating. I mean, let's be honest here. You're always playing these intimidating roles. The angry man with a gun, the scary character who yells and curses. Don't you think that sends the wrong message? There it was, out in the open, sitting on the table between them like something that could not be put back. Jackson leaned back in his chair. A long beat, and then, with the quiet authority of a man deciding to engage rather than retreat, "Are you seriously asking me this question right now?" Behar continued, and with each sentence, the temperature in that studio climbed another degree. "I'm just saying," she went on, her voice taking on that particular tone, patronizing, instructional, the tone of someone delivering wisdom to someone who hasn't asked for it. "Maybe you could choose more positive roles, something more uplifting, more inspirational." Jackson repeated the word, slowly, like he was turning it over in his hands, examining its edges. More inspirational? Then, sharper now, a heat beginning to surface beneath the composure. Lady, do you have any idea what you're talking about? Another host saw it coming, started to reach for the wheel of the conversation, desperate to steer it somewhere safer. Maybe we should move on too. But Behar cut her off. She wasn't finished. She was, in fact, just getting started. No, I think this is an important conversation. Samuel, you have influence. You have power in Hollywood. Why not use it to show more positive images instead of all this violence and anger? Jackson's jaw tightened. It is a particular kind of experience, being lectured about your own life by someone who has not lived it. And there is a particular kind of expression a person wears when they are enduring exactly that. It is not anger, not yet. It is something more complex, the expression of a person processing a profound and insulting surprise. You want to lecture me about my career choices? Jackson said. About the roles I pick? I'm not lecturing anyone, Behar shot back, her voice getting sharper. I'm asking legitimate questions. You can't deny that many of your characters are problematic. Problematic. The word hung in the air of that studio like smoke. Jackson turned the word over once more, this time with something unmistakable in his voice, that low, controlled edge that audiences around the world would recognize from 100 different screens. You think my work is problematic? The camera operators were receiving nervous signals from the producers stationed off stage. The other hosts were holding themselves very, very still. And Behar astonishingly continued, all I'm saying is that representation matters. And when young people see you constantly playing these aggressive roles, what kind of message does that send? Jackson sat forward, his eyes locked on hers. When he spoke, his voice was measured, deliberate, like a man laying out an argument that has already been fully formed in his mind, waiting for exactly this moment. Let me get this straight. You think I should only play characters that make you comfortable? That's not what I said. No, that's exactly what you said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You want me to play nice, safe characters that don't challenge anyone or make anyone think too hard. I want you to be more responsible, Behar shot back, her own voice rising now. You have a platform. Use it better. The words settled into the studio like a verdict, and for a long moment, Samuel L. Jackson simply looked at her. The stillness of a man deciding exactly how to respond to something that does not deserve a small response. Responsible, he said finally. His voice had dropped. Not in volume, in temperature. You want to talk about responsibility? What happened next was the moment that divided the interview into two distinct halves, before and after. I think you're being overly sensitive. Those words, that phrase. The studio seemed to inhale. Every person on that set felt it. The shift, the crossing of a line from which there would be no easy return. And Samuel L. Pert. Jackson's expression changed completely. Overly sensitive, he repeated slowly, his voice dropping to that register, that particular, unmistakable register that anyone familiar with his work would recognize immediately. Did you just call me overly sensitive? Behar's earlier confidence was starting to show its cracks. I'm just saying that maybe you're reading too much into my comments. No, Joy. His voice was ice over rock. You don't get to walk that back now. You questioned my intelligence, my career choices, and my integrity, and now you want to tell me I'm being too sensitive about it. The other host tried once more to intervene, desperately, visibly, hands reaching for a conversation that was no longer theirs to control, but Jackson had found his footing, and he was not moving. No, we're not getting off track, he said. We're finally getting to the point. Joy here thinks she can sit behind this table and lecture me about how I should live my life and conduct my career. I have every right to ask questions. That's what we do here. Jackson laughed. A single, dry, humorless sound. Those weren't questions, Joy. That was you trying to put me in a box, trying to make me into some kind of problem that needs fixing. And then Behar made the choice that would define this moment in television history. Cornered, flushed, her composure unraveling under the relentless, patient logic of a man who had been underestimated one time too many, she doubled down. I think you're overreacting, she said, her voice sliding back into that dismissive register. All I did was ask some simple questions about your career. Jackson's eyes widened, not with surprise, with something more precise than that. He rose from his chair. The entire studio tensed as one. Let me tell you something about your simple questions, Joy. His voice was building now, not out of control, but controlled and building, the way a great performance builds, with purpose and precision. When you suggest that my career is somehow harmful, that is not a simple question. When you imply that I am irresponsible for the roles I choose, that is not a simple question. Behar remained seated, but she had changed. The aggressive lean forward was gone. She was sitting back now, recalibrating. Beginning to understand too late that she had profoundly misjudged this moment. You want to know what's really irresponsible? Jackson continued, his voice reaching that powerful crescendo that has captivated audiences across 3 decades. Sitting here with millions of people watching and making assumptions about someone's character based on the movies they've been in? I wasn't making assumptions. Yes, you were. Immediate. Absolute. You looked at me and saw nothing but the characters I've played. You didn't see the man who has been married to the same woman for over 40 years. You didn't see the man who has taken countless young actors under his wing and helped them navigate this industry. You didn't see the man who has donated millions to charity and worked tirelessly for social causes. The studio was perfectly, completely silent. Even the cameras had stopped moving. The audience was holding its collective breath. All you saw, Jackson said, his voice filling with something raw and real, something beyond performance, something that came from a place no script had ever reached, was what you wanted to see, a stereotype that you could lecture and fix. Behar opened her mouth, but Jackson was not finished. And you know what the worst part is? He looked at her with something beyond anger, something that looked, almost, like grief. You think you're being progressive. You think you're helping by policing my career choices. But what you're really doing is trying to control how I express myself as an artist. That is not helpful, Joy. That is the opposite of help. That's not true. Isn't it? He turned to address the camera, directly, deliberately, speaking not to Behar alone, but to every person watching at home. Do you have any idea how insulting it is to have someone tell you that your life's work, your artistic expression, is wrong because it doesn't fit their narrow view of what you should be doing? The other hosts had stopped trying to intervene. They were watching it unfold like everyone else, mesmerized, almost unable to look away. I've spent 3 decades building a career, Jackson said, turning back to face her directly, his full attention, his full weight. 3 decades choosing roles that interest me, that challenges me, that tell stories that need to be told. And you think you can sum all of that up as problematic? Behar was visibly uncomfortable now, shifting, searching for an exit that wasn't there. I think you're taking this too personally. And those words, those 5 words, hit like a slap. Too personally? Jackson's voice cracked with genuine emotion. My career is personal, Joy. My art is personal. When you attack that, you are attacking me. And the fact that you can't even see it, that makes it worse. You are so comfortable in your position of privilege that you don't even realize when you are being disrespectful. The word privilege hit a nerve. You could see it. Behar's defensive walls, already crumbling, reassembled themselves in an instant. Privilege? What privilege? Jackson looked at her with an expression approaching disbelief. The privilege of sitting behind that desk and thinking you can judge other people's life choices. The privilege of believing that your opinion about my career matters more than the decades of work I have put in. I have a right to my opinion. You have a right to your opinion, Jackson agreed, and something in the way he agreed made it sound more devastating than a disagreement. But you do not have the right to be disrespectful. You do not have the right to reduce my work to stereotypes. And you certainly do not have the right to lecture me about responsibility when you clearly don't understand the first thing about what I do. Then Behar said it, the thing she could not take back. Her face was flushed. Her composure, that carefully constructed, television-polished composure, was gone, replaced by something raw and reactive. You know what? Maybe the problem isn't your roles. Maybe the problem is your attitude. The words detonated in the air of that studio. Jackson froze, stared at her. And when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. My attitude? Yes, your attitude. You come in here acting like you're above criticism, like nobody has the right to question anything you do. I think you have a problem with authority. The other hosts were now frantically signaling for a commercial break, for anything, a fire alarm, an act of God, anything that would stop what was coming. But it was far, far too late. Jackson looked at her for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. Not a warm laugh, not a polite laugh, the kind of laugh that comes from the place just before fury. Low, almost private. Authority, he said softly. You think you represent authority here? I represent the voice of the audience. I ask the questions that need to be asked. The laughter stopped completely, like a switch had been thrown. No, Joy, Samuel L. Jackson said, you represent everything that is wrong with this business. The entitled, self-righteous attitude that thinks it can tear down other people's accomplishments because it makes you feel important. Behar's mouth fell open. How dare you? I've been in this business for decades. I've earned my place at this table. Have you? Jackson tilted his head, steadying her with the calm of a man who has already won. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've earned your place by being controversial, not by being good at what you do. The insult found its mark with devastating precision. Behar's face turned crimson. Every filter, every professional instinct, every carefully maintained television persona, gone. She shot up from her chair. You arrogant piece of work. Who do you think you are? I know exactly who I am, Jackson replied, and he was the only calm person left in that studio. I'm someone who has earned respect through talent, hard work, and dedication, not someone who got famous by running their mouth and tearing other people down. Behar pointed an accusatory finger across the table. You think you're so much better than everyone else, don't you? You think because you're some big movie star you can come in here and disrespect me on my own show? Jackson's response was surgical. Your show? I thought this was The View, not the Joy Behar Hour. The other hosts winced. He had just named the thing that clearly haunted her, the desperate need to own every room she entered, to be the center of every story. This is my workplace, Behar screamed, her composure entirely gone now. And I don't have to sit here and take this abuse from some has-been actor who thinks he's too good for honest questions. The studio gasped. The word had been spoken. Has been. Applied to one of the most enduring, consistently working, globally respected actors of his generation. The insult was so far beyond the line that even Behar seemed to know, the moment the word left her mouth, that she had made a catastrophic mistake. Jackson went very, very still. Has been, he said quietly. The way a man speaks when he has crossed from anger into something deeper, something colder, something that does not require volume to carry weight. Did you just call me a has-been? Behar's pride wouldn't let her retract it. If the shoe fits, she said, but her voice had gone thin, and Samuel L. Jackson nodded slowly. Once he turned, not to Behar, to the camera, to the lens, to the millions of people watching at home who had just witnessed everything that had happened in that studio. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice perfectly, almost eerily controlled, you have just witnessed something remarkable. You watched someone reveal their true character on live television. He turned back to Behar one final time. She was standing behind her chair now, literally using it as a barrier between herself and the consequences of what she had said. You want to call me a has-been? Let's talk about careers, Joy. Let's talk about legacy. His voice began to build once more, one last time. I have made over 150 films. I have worked with every major director in Hollywood. I have brought complex, meaningful characters to life for 3 decades. He looked at her with something that was neither contempt nor compassion, but something rarer than both, clarity. And what have you done? What is your contribution to the world? Sitting behind a desk, tearing down people who actually create something, who actually contributes to the culture. He began to move toward the edge of the stage, unhurried, deliberate, a man who had said everything that needed to be said. You want to lecture me about responsibility? About the message I sent? He paused. What message do you send, Joy? What do you contribute to society besides negativity and division? Barr, perhaps finally understanding the magnitude of what had unfolded, made one last attempt. Samuel, wait. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Why don't we start over? Jackson stopped. turned back to her one final time. And on his face was something that, in all the heat and fury of the preceding minutes, had not been there before. Not anger, not satisfied, something closer to sorrow. "Start over?" he said quietly. "Lady, there is no starting over from what just happened here. You showed everyone exactly who you are today." He looked into the camera one last time. To anyone watching at home, remember this moment. Remember what happens when ego gets in the way of basic human decency, and remember that respect is earned, not demanded. And with that calm, measured, and completely intact, Samuel L. Jackson walked off the stage. The camera lingered on Joy Behar's face. Flushed. Still. Somewhere between shock and something she would not have a name for until much later, when the headlines started coming in, and the clips started circulating, and the world delivered its verdict, the show cut to a commercial. Mercifully, finally. But the damage was done, and not to Samuel L. Jackson. In under 30 minutes, a man who had come to talk about a film had instead delivered something far more significant, not a performance, a principle, a refusal, public and unambiguous, to be diminished by someone who had never taken the time to actually see him. The clip spread across the internet within hours, millions of views, millions of conversations. Some people argued about who had crossed the line first. Others debated the nature of critique and accountability in the entertainment industry, but most people, the overwhelming majority, simply watched a man who had been treated with contempt choose dignity over silence. And that, it turned out, was the most cinematic moment of all. There is a particular kind of courage that has nothing to do with volume, nothing to do with anger or spectacle or the satisfaction of a sharp comeback landing cleanly in a crowded room. It is the courage of a person who knows exactly who they are and refuses, with full composure and full voice, to let anyone else decide that for them. Samuel L. Persons. Jackson had walked onto that set that morning as an actor promoting a film. He walked off as something more enduring than any role he had ever played. A man who, when given the choice between comfort and truth, chose truth without hesitation and without apology. There will always be voices that try to reduce a life's work to a label. That mistake is the character a person plays for the person playing them. That confuses cultural criticism with personal authority, and there will always be moments, rare, electric, unforgettable moments, when someone decides that today is the day they will not let that stand. This was one of those moments, and the world was watching.